You have found the Shanny Pants Show. Hello, it's Shanny, the least influential influencer that there ever was. With a heart full of laughter and a journey that runs deeper than the trendiest makeup You may know me from my ridiculously comedic fashion and makeup tutorials on social media. But guess what? There's so much more to the story. I was born, raised, and married in a cult. When I left the cult at 31 years old, I had no knowledge about real life or how to process what I had been through. I felt very alone. The past couple of years, I've been on an incredible journey of learning, growing, and recovering, and I'm excited to share this with you. I'll bring you stories from the cultiverse, where many cult survivors and experts share their knowledge and experiences. Their stories are more than inspiring. They're a roadmap to self-discovery and resilience. So get ready for a podcast that's part comedy, part wisdom, and a whole lot of heart. If you feel alone in your journey, my hope is that that will change once you hear these stories. Welcome to the Shanny Pants Show. I am so excited to have you both here today, and this is super fun to have both of you, your siblings. This is Jon and Shelly that we have on the show today. So why don't you guys each, maybe Jon, you can start, give a little intro of yourself, and then we'll kind of talk about your guys' story.
I'm Jon Snow. Grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. Also grew up in the IFB, or the Independent Fundamental Baptist Cult. I am now an actor and a writer in Los Angeles, California.
And I am his sister, Shelly Snow Pordea. I also obviously grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. I actually now live not far from St. Louis, and I am a novelist and screenwriter and publishing.
Today, I really want to hear kind of more about your guys' story, your upbringing. Obviously, you kind of said what you grew up in as far as cult goes. And I just would love to hear kind of your guys' experiences, anything that stands out to you, because again, we're all just sharing our stories. And that's what my listeners, I know, love to hear, is just the relatability in others' stories, even if we come from different backgrounds. There's just so much there that like crosses all kinds of borders and, you know, relate just to so many people's situations. So if you guys just want to kind of start from your childhood and move forward, and then as we go, if I have any questions, I'll jot them down and be sure to interrupt you with all of my questions.
Cool.
Great.
Oh,
I'll let Jon start.
Man,
He's the
I
older
was
sibling.
Okay.
yeah,
so
thank
sweet.
you for that. No
Very
pressure at
respectful.
all.
Obviously, you were spanked as a child.
I was ready to default to my upbringing and say, well, ladies first, please. Yeah,
She beat
right.
you
I
to it.
know. Okay, well, you know, we were born into the IFB cult. You know, we didn't know anything else. We didn't know anything better. It just was what it was. It was life. And that meant being at church most of your days and all of your life. You know, we had Sunday morning, Sunday night. We had Wednesday night services. We had chapel in school on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Fridays, I think we might have gotten some sort of respite, even though we had Bible class.
When we were teenagers, it was youth group.
There you go. I blocked some things out, which is why I wanted to defer to Shelly. And then Saturday we would go, you know, to door, trying to recruit kids to come with us to Sunday school the next morning. So that was everything. Our entire lives, our entire schedules revolved around being in these churches. And, you know, we were at what was referred to in Let Us Pray as the mothership of the IFB. We were at Hammond Baptist, or First Baptist Church of Hammond, Indiana, you know, during some very formidable years for us. From the time I was 5 until I was 12. And then, you know, we were in other IFB churches after that, once Dad graduated from their illustrious Bible college to become an ordained minister himself. And that was it. We bopped around to a few different churches, but, you know, that was it. That was everything. Life was that. And I like to compare it to being poor, which we were also very, very poor. And when you're a kid, you don't know that you're poor until you do. It's just something that is, and that's exactly how being in the cult felt. It wasn't anything we knew better. We just knew that this is what life was. And so we lived it because you have no autonomy as a child, and
Right.
that's what you do. So, yeah,
Now, do you guys have other siblings, or is it the two of you? You have
we
other
do.
siblings. Okay.
Yeah, well, there's this big gap between us.
Okay.
Shelly and I are a year and a half apart, much like you and your sister.
Mm-hmm.
And then David was born 9 years after when I was 9. And Susie came along when I was 11.
Oh, wow. That's so
Yeah.
funny. We have a baby sister too, who was 9 years younger than me. So, but then it stopped at her. But we had that big gap too. And it's so interesting. I don't know if you guys have this with your family, but with us, it's so interesting how being that spread apart, our experiences within our cult, completely different. Completely
Completely.
different. So
Same here.
yeah, it's very interesting. Like my
Yeah.
sister that's more my age or closer to my age, we relate a lot more on things that happened, where baby sister is just like, what? No, that didn't happen. And we're like, no, you were precious and you were a lot later. So you are lucky. You can thank us for going through all the trauma and saving you from that. But
Yep.
it's very interesting how that happens. Huh.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. And then
I've had all three of my siblings, Shelly included, say to me at some point, some version of "thank you for being the first," because you took a lot off of all of us.
yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
remember going home when I was older, and my brother, who was a teenager at the time, had Maxim magazines laying around his bedroom and had rock and roll band posters on his wall. And I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, how did we get here? I had to hide cassette tapes
Right.
in the dust cover underneath the bunkie board of my bunk bed, and I still got caught. They still found those.
Oh, this sounds very, very much like our family. That's hilarious.
All I could say was, "You're welcome, David,"
Mhm.
because I wore them down and broke them,
Right,
and
right.
you got to enjoy the fruits of my labor.
Totally, totally. Oh my gosh. Oh, wow. And then, okay, so then once you said you were 12 when you moved to a different,
Mhm.
and then did your dad
Yeah.
become like a pastor or ordained leader? No, he didn't after
Not
that.
for a long time.
No,
Oh,
he's,
Yeah.
not
I
for a
mean,
long
he
time.
still was really dedicated to the church, and he
Okay.
was what we called a song leader. And
Oh,
so
we had
he
song
would,
leaders
yeah,
too.
there you go.
So-
So, he would organize the,
That's
yes,
right. That's right.
exactly. You're directing in 4/4 time. That's amazing.
Yes.
So yeah, that's what he would do. He would pick the hymns for Sunday morning.
Okay.
You're Catholic and you're hiding it. I
Yeah.
don't know.
I love it.
Oh my
The
gosh.
special music for Sundays, he would organize that. you
Yep.
know.
He was assistant pastor in places. He was Sunday school teacher. He was
Okay.
a teacher
Yeah.
in the schools that were attached
Okay.
to the churches. He did a
Okay.
lot of different things.
Right.
Yeah.
Never
Before he
paid, but
Right. Well, yeah, and before he finally became a pastor himself, where he also was not paid, but that's a whole
Cool.
other ball
yeah.
of wax.
Oh my gosh. That makes sense.
I mean, totally.
Totally normal. Now, so you guys did have, and of course, I've watched the documentaries and stuff, but I really don't know about your guys' story. So this is awesome. But you guys did have Sunday schools, and
That's Jesus. That's Jesus back
I
there.
think
He's
so.
upset.
I'm like, oh, the thunder or something. Maybe I should take my hat off. I don't know. So you did have Sunday schools where the children went during church, correct? Okay. And then you had schools for education that you also went to that were connected with the church.
Yeah. Our Sunday schools were actually like the hour before church, and we were expected
Yes.
to attend church as well with the
Okay.
adults. So we
Okay.
had 2 hours of church, and we were actually known and featured in Time magazine. I think it was in 1975, was it, John? that
my
or
God.
6.
I don't know. I have the actual magazine. I found it on eBay and I bought it, but I
Yeah.
can't remember. But
Oh,
it's around that time.
But
Yeah.
oh
as
my
the world's
God.
largest Sunday school, because
Oh,
Yeah.
obviously we could say that we had the world's largest Sunday school and there would be no fact checking or, you
right.
know,
It's
officials
just,
from the Guinness Book of World Records called or whatever it would take, you know.
they just believe you because
Like,
you're such sweet, honest people.
totally.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so that makes sense though, because children have really large attention spans. So definitely 2
Yeah.
hours is better than 1. So
Totally.
Not
that's
only
fun.
that, but the capability of reason,
Oh,
and just really truly understanding the King James version of
Correct.
the Bible. It was really it was candy. It was easy.
don't you feel like it just sunk in and now you're just
Oh,
filled with so much biblical knowledge?
I wanted to get up and teach it myself because I understood it so effortlessly.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it is. It's amazing. So we had to do on our Sunday. So we didn't have Sunday school because we just were required to be with the group, and we met at like several, but Grange Hall. So because we weren't allowed to call ourselves a church because we were more special than that. And so we the Grange Hall, sit on the metal chairs, but the kids were required to sit with the parents, babies, everyone.
Mhm.
And because we didn't have Sunday school or anything. And so I think it was just because we were such an elevated group of children, most likely. They just
Mm.
knew that we would absorb all that knowledge with the adults. We did not need Sunday school because we were just so brilliant.
Right. Right.
So I feel like, and then when I got out, I realized like I literally know nothing about the Bible. Nothing. Like, because it was just like a ball of anxiety the whole time I was in there. And then it was like, oh, okay, it's over. But our meetings went long. Like, we didn't have requirements on when to stop. And any women, really weren't allowed to speak, but any men could like stand up and say whatever they felt like saying, which was usually stupid shit. And so sometimes we'd have 2-hour meetings, sometimes 3-hour meetings. Like, it just depended who wanted to talk. But I would say typically it was probably about an hour and a half. But with the singing and all of that. So it was so fun. So fun. So when you guys
So
moved to a different state, was it very similar from how you originally kind of grew up that long period of time as far
Yeah,
as the church?
yeah, like John said, we moved back and, we were on the cusp of, preteen, I guess is what we were, and so that's when I started to notice, and I'm sure John, can talk about his experience, but I started to notice the differences more because we weren't at the mega church anymore. And so though we did go to an affiliated church, it was small congregation, like a couple hundred people. And so going from seeing whatever 20,000 on campus every Sunday, like they said, to
God.
200, it's like, oh, this is different here. And so that changed, at least my experience. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I don't know how different it felt to me, other than the size. It felt pretty much the same.
Like
They
the
are
teachings and everything.
they love
Teachings
well
were
they
the same.
love
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
love to call themselves independent. It's in the name.
Right.
But they're so connected, and every one of these churches is just a clone from Jack Hyles's church. And every one of those preachers was trying to be Jack Hyles as much as they possibly could. So to me, there wasn't much difference. It was just I couldn't hide as easily in it because
Yeah.
I was one of 200 rather than one of 20,000.
Right.
And so to me, it felt more exposed, I think.
Yeah.
I could see that. Yeah.
We also had our first experience outside of the schools. We went to a public school for a short
True.
time. And
Okay.
so I think that for me was like eye-opening of how different are we, but it also confirmed some of the teachings that we were hearing for so many years of like the outsiders and this is how the world is, and you're of the select few and this is how other people live, and then you see that like, oh, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in this public school, and I don't know, I'm a fish out of water, and
Right.
so
Yeah, Shelly, and you correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like Shelly and I had two very different experiences going to the public school, where Shelly felt so out of place and couldn't wait to get out of there.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You remember
And
what I had to wear, right?
I do. I
Okay,
do.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Right,
John
the
was
guys
just
had
this
it a lot easier.
Exactly. John was just this adorable hip teenager.
And then he's like, yeah, that's my sister.
For me, I was an Amish kid on Rumspringa. Like, I was like, let's fucking go.
I bet.
I could not get enough.
And I was like in my culottes looking at people like, I don't know what this looks like.
Oh, I think you're the first person on the podcast that has mentioned culottes besides me. And it just warms my heart because no one ever knows what culottes are. And I'm like, it's basically a really full skirt for each leg. And,
Yes.
it's real, it's super comfortable and so fun. That's amazing. Yeah, that was fun. Wasn't that fun to go to school dressed like an idiot?
Is it cutting out for you?
Oh,
It is
just
cutting
did.
out for
Oh,
me.
okay.
Yeah. There you
Hi.
are.
Hi.
You're slightly pixelated, but you're
I
at
am?
least not robot-y sounding. Yeah.
Okay. As long as it sounds good, it's cool.
Now the sound
Sound
is
is
better.
better.
Okay. Shoot.
But we lost you for a moment there.
Yeah, checking my Wi-Fi real quick. It looks fine. All right, we'll see if it happens again, but we're good. It was probably
Robot.
because we were talking about culottes in a
Yeah,
sarcastic way.
right. Right. Derogatory manner.
Right.
Yeah.
They're so gorgeous. And my mom
Amazing.
made all of our clothes too, like all of our culottes. And like we did buy some stuff from the stores, but they usually weren't modest enough. And so we had to make them
Right.
modest or
Correct.
make
Yeah.
them. Mhm.
Well,
Yeah.
jean skirts was a big thing in our world, but then culottes we had to have made because my mom didn't really. I mean, she can sew actually, but she did.
But someone made them for you.
Someone made them for us.
Yeah.
And I think she might have for my younger sister. See, this is how it went in our cult. It's like they were approved. Things were approved. Like you could wear the big baggy Bermuda walking shorts when I was a kid. And
Okay.
then as time progressed, it's like, but those are actually also men's clothing. So we have
Oh.
to make them, even though they could look like a baggy skirt and don't show your form, we're going to make them because biblically speaking, it has to be intended for a woman. And
Right. It's a slippery
so,
slope.
yes.
you
So then you would
know?
get patterns and stuff like that. And I think
Yes.
at that point, that's when when the patterns started to come out, my mom would make them for my younger sister, but I was older. So it's just like, I'll wear a skirt, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. You kind of age out of the culotte situation.
Yeah.
And
Oh.
to be fair, I wasn't allowed to wear shorts.
Right.
That's true.
Okay. Right.
You
Except for
know,
playing
does-
basketball. You could wear-
No, not even playing
What?
basketball. Do you remember when I first played basketball? Dad made me wear sweatpants under my shorts.
No, I didn't remember that.
Oh.
That's
Yes.
awful.
Yes. Until he finally realized that I was the only one that was wearing sweatpants under my shorts.
You think?
And he felt bad and decided that I could indeed wear shorts playing basketball.
He never felt bad that I was the only girl in the public
Right.
school wearing culottes, however.
Well, this was at Victory Christian
Oh, okay.
when he realized I was the only Christian boy wearing sweatpants
Oh,
under
that
my
makes a
shorts.
difference. Okay.
Because, honestly, at 14, 15, 16, my spaghetti legs were
Yeah.
sexy as
Yeah.
hell. And I had
Absolutely.
girls drooling
Right.
over those twigs.
Oh my
Oh, well,
gosh.
please. He
Yes.
always had girls drooling, so
Yeah.
don't let him give you that.
But it was mostly the twigs,
It was.
which is why I had to cover them up.
Right. Just to be safe.
Totally.
You don't want
Right.
to cause others to sin in their heart.
Can't be
so-
responsible for what these things can do on their own.
Right. Right. Oh my God.
But isn't that interesting though? Because that's the actual concept that you are taught is that you aren't able to control anything
Right.
outside of these parameters of control we're putting on you. So it's like such a messed up message.
It
Yeah.
really is. Well, and for children, like my sister and I, when we were just talking, so confusing,
Mm.
because it's just like these, like I remember there was a song we sang too, but about being a hypocrite, and it's like they preach that from the front, like we don't want to be hypocritical and stuff, and I'm like, that's what we all are doing. Like we all are being hypocrites. Like, so
Right.
one day you can wear shorts to the gym and then the next day you can't because all of a sudden you were convicted that they're bad now. Like, cool. That makes so much sense. So much sense. So very confusing as a
So-
child.
Yeah, for me, one of the most confusing thing was going to Blockbuster.
Oh.
Somehow we could go and rent a movie. Now, mind you, it was always a family friendly movie.
Right.
But we could rent some movie from Blockbuster, yet I couldn't go to the movie theater and see it because that was a sin.
Right. That's not confusing.
Yeah.
Not
at
at all.
Not at
Clear
all.
as
Yeah.
mud. Yeah. That's a good one. That's a good
I don't know
one.
that they expected all of that to happen either, because like our cult was very much steeped in the ideal 1950s housewife,
Mm.
when the women's lib and like the 60s and 70s started to come, and they like made this really concerted effort to go back to the good old days. And so as things started coming out and you were able to have home theaters, which we didn't have a television in our home for a good many years, right, John?
Yeah.
Like maybe not
Yeah.
until we moved back to St. Louis. So
Well, we had that little black and white TV in Hammond
Oh,
where we were
yeah.
able to watch channel 66, which was like My Three Sons and
yes,
My
okay.
Favorite Martian and like all these old black and white
Yeah.
TV shows that we were allowed to watch because those were wholesome,
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we
makes
were
sense.
allowed to watch that.
Yeah.
That's right. And
true.
only like during certain times that our parents
Mhm.
approved and all that stuff. So
Right.
yeah, but we had very limited television before then, but like it was the 1980s and everything like VHS, and we were starting to like not be at the mega church anymore. So that's when we got more
Betamax and
Betamax.
Laserdisc.
Yes, laser discs and all the things. So I don't know that they quite expected all of the boom in technology to happen as quickly as it did. And
Right.
so you can't really control. So you had to make rules that applied. Like you can't go to the movie theater because God knows people like hug and kiss in there. And
Well, not
so
only that, but you're also supporting the evil
Yeah.
Hollywood because
that
your
doesn't-
money goes.
does that make sense though? Because
No, that's exactly.
Oh,
I remember
okay.
being
Oh,
told this.
yeah.
I remember being told this that you
Ah.
go to the movies and you support those actors and those evil people in Hollywood.
Which you are
Surprise.
now. Yeah.
it's
So
yes, the ultimate like
I decided to just
You're
go
like-
full in and just like support them wholeheartedly.
Right. You're like, this seems like a good career direction to go in.
I joined that cult instead. Thank you.
Oh, I love it. Oh, that's so interesting. Okay, so we weren't allowed. I'm loving all these comparisons. So sorry, but we weren't allowed movies, TV, any of that as well. But I remember in my parents' closet, our house was kind of like a long kind of ranchish, I would describe it, I guess, house. And so we had a long hallway, and in my parents' master bedroom, they had a walk-in closet, and we had a monitor. We wouldn't call it a TV. It was a monitor on a like push, little rolly push TV holder tray thing table.
Like at
And-
school when they would do movie day.
No, but yes, actually, yes, like that, but
Yeah.
but a crappy one. And
Okay.
a little lower tech because you don't want to like actually put too much thought into like we have a TV. So, but we would roll it down the long hallway into the living room, and we would watch movies. Like Sound of Music. And this was again
Right.
kind of like you. It was pick and choose. Like if my dad was out of town, mom would rent us a couple of VHSs, and we would watch like Anne of Avonlea. There was like a whole series. We watched those, and it was just us three girls, so we loved it, But I will never forget, and this happened multiple times, and we'd roll it all the way down this long hallway. It was carpet, and you'd have to push. Like I remember really putting your back into it all the way down to the living room. And because our life was only the people in our group, our cult, those were these are the only people that you're friends with, really. So my husband, my now husband's family was just very known for randomly just showing up at people's houses. And it was before cell phones and stuff. And I think it was because they just didn't like being together. And so they would rather get out and do something and hang out with other people and make other people miserable as well.
Oh,
So,
God.
but I remember one night, all of a sudden, knock, knock, knock at the door. Or no, we could see him pull up because our windows face that way. Saw him pull up and we're like, oh, shit. We would not have said, oh, shit. Oh,
Right.
bummer. And we put, like,
Fiddlesticks.
we were pushing that TV so fast down the hallway, like just, and then the person behind was on the carpet, rubbing out the wheel marks of the TV thing. Because, the monitor, there were these huge, heavy, like, boxes.
Oh, God.
And that happened multiple times. And it was like, we had it down. One person pushed, the next person was rubbing out the marks in the carpet. We had it down. But yeah, it was definitely a pick and choose when we would pull that bad boy out. And definitely not movie theaters. And probably for the same reasons. It was just, everything was bad, for us, even other churches. How was that for you guys? Like, were other churches wrong?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
All of them.
Yeah.
It's good.
And even sometimes people who were within the movement and then like deviated from one of the like preferential things, like John mentioned the King James Version of the Bible. And there was this huge, like, let's push for everybody to make this a really big deal and why and all this. And some people were like, okay, cool, we use it, but why are you making such a big deal? And then the next Sunday they would get like lambasted in the pulpit about like, a snake in the grass and all this stuff. It's just no one was safe from the fury, for real.
Yeah, and then they would call people out right in the middle of, like, that were sitting in the audience.
Oh,
They would call them out from the pulpit too, just like right in front of everybody.
It's happened to me.
Yeah.
Like I literally was in a singing group and I don't know if we had already sung and then come back down and you sit like in the first couple of rows. And Jack Hiles was preaching his sermon and my husband now, but I think we were just dating then, like looked at me and said something, but I was looking straight at Jack Hiles and he just went off on the young people in the front who want to talk instead of listen to the man of God. And I was like, I'm going to actually die in this chair.
Oh my gosh. This just sounds way too familiar. Oh my gosh. That is so interesting. And so do you feel like, obviously when you watch these documentaries and stuff, and I think probably with any organization of any sort, there's going to be that abuse and all of these things that people don't know about that's going on. What would you say as far as like the whole group experience like that, like being pointed out in church or we rebuked is what we used to call it, like we would be rebuked. And
we're very familiar with that word.
So all of us young people would like joke and call it rebukal. And so it just made it more fun, I guess, like, I got rebuked again today, like that was awesome. But like, what other things would you say, like more mainstream, would be the things that you would say were culty about this or that people feared? Because I feel like it's similar to your group, like everything, the reason people stayed, the reason they got people, it was all fear-based. None of it to me was like, when I look back, was, oh, the love of God or anything like that. It was all very fear-based. What do you think? Like, was it similar as far as like all the things? Is that why it was just you were afraid?
Oh, I think so. John and I have actually discussed this at length about how as a child, everything was scary. And meaning that you didn't know from one day to the next what would be considered, quote, worldly or what you would get in trouble because it seems like your attitude, would be off limits. Well, even the like movie thing, right? For example, it's like, well, people are starting to get TVs or like rent movie or whatever, want to, be more exposed to movies and things. It's like, well, we'll say they can rent them. Right. But then you can only rent a certain type. And then you had to buy a TV Guardian. Do you know what that is?
Oh, yes. We never had one because we were allowed to have TVs, period. So you just kept it a real secret. Yeah.
So it's just like, it's everything was a potential of being outside of the will of God, and that depended on what somebody decided to preach about that day. It's funny that you mentioned too, like, I don't remember learning a lot about like the Bible and Jesus, and maybe in Sunday school we had those stories because you know you can be familiar with them, but like in the pulpit it was always about something that was evil and bad and a person, a thing, or whatever, and never about like scripture.
Right.
Yeah. Or a group of people, or,
Yeah.
you know, whether that was another church or that was, you know, the women's rights movement or whatever it was. It was always, or if you're, you know, homosexual or whatever it was all of those pointing
That's
out
what you
that's
hear about.
bad. These people are wrong. These people are evil. Hollywood was evil, you know, all those sorts of things.
Yeah, and looking back, we can see like the manipulation in the actual timeline of the sermons, because he would take, like Jack Hyles in particular, he would take a scripture and then just base an entire sermon around that like one phrase or line or concept. And if you study the history of like the accusations against him or his son, or, you know, scandals within the church, you know, it's very convenient that you're like, and this passage of scripture says that you're not allowed to speak ill against your brother. And so, or sue your fellow Christian or whatever.
If there's not two witnesses,
Yes.
isn't that what it was?
Mm-hmm.
Threshold, two witnesses, and if there aren't two witnesses, then there can be no sin or no crime or
Did you see
whatever.
the abuse? Did you?
Right.
You know, were you
Right.
there? Like, oh yeah, because usually perpetrators invite witnesses.
Right. Exactly.
You know?
Like, yeah,
Hey, come watch what I'm about to do right here.
yeah, exactly. Oh, it's so sad. So it sounds like just basically all the abuse or anything like that was very hidden. And do you like you were saying you kind of got called out in church as far as like the young people want to talk instead of listen, and you know, we are always doing something bad, I'm sure, but like I remember like people being used as examples. So when, like, for instance, this one gal, I use this story all the time because it's hilarious now, but she started wearing pants, which is terrible. And and just like, not to meeting or anything, but just like to her mailbox, you know, like not, we're not talking like showing up to church in your pants, you know? And then later, I don't know how much later, I was younger, she had an affair with someone outside of our meeting group. Well, that was used for an example forever, that she started wearing pants. And
slippery slope.
Yes.
It's a slippery slope.
I knew exactly where you were going.
Yes. See, and it's just like, and so you have these poor people that are humans and make mistakes, and they get pointed out. And I mean, this happened over and over. And to me, the mental abuse, especially, I feel like more the young men in our cult, they would have to stand up, you know, on the stage and get rebuked in front of everyone. And, you know, for like going to a movie or for going to another church. And I'm like, and then some other more like, you know, like having sex and stuff like that, of course, came too. But it was so sad. It was like you're ripping these people apart in front of other people, all their friends. I mean, basically everyone they know. And the mental abuse that created, and you look at these people now, and I mean, so many, I mean, including myself and my husband and everyone, like so many issues because of that screwing with our minds. And it's like, and yet, if you were the right last name, it would get put under the rug. Like, well, we're not real sure. Like probably the two witnesses things came into play, you know, like, well,
yeah.
I mean, one person said it happened, but we're going to just hide this one. Very frustrating as a child, especially when you knew, like as a teen, I would know things that happened. And then I'm like, why isn't she being rebuked for this, you know? And yet this person was torn apart for it. So very, very sad.
Did they
pick and
ever
choosy.
in yours? Because I don't know how big the organization is or lack
Mm.
of organization since you're
Yeah.
not allowed to call it. But like, did they ever ship people out to like that's what happened in ours a lot. If you had the
Mhm.
right last name, like you were saying, or the right position or something, you would be like, oh well, they're just going to that other like city or church or
Yes.
whatever. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So
And
it's
we had a
common.
pretty small group, but there was enough, like us locally, the one I went to, we were probably about 150 people maybe. But we had, like, Texas was our biggest one, I think. There was like one, two, three, four in California. But yes,
Yeah,
Virginia. So someone that, oh, actually, Shantae that you guys met,
yeah.
she was shipped
Yeah.
to a different family's house
Oh yes. Okay.
in a different state because she was, troubled and needed more help than her parents could provide. And so yeah, it definitely happened. And like we laugh about it now, but at our leader's house locally, there always was some chick living there. And so
Mm.
now we're always like, what was going on there? But always there was some, troubled girl living at that house. And I'm just,
Mm.
needed extra
Yeah.
counseling, I suppose.
I'm sure. I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Oh, it's so
Yeah.
sad. You know, in
So
our
sad.
incident or in our case experience, we have a family member who was actually brought in front of the church for discipline who was, pregnant before married and
Oh, gosh.
just awful what they went through. And then
Yeah.
I'll let John share more about his story. But one of the reasons I think that really made a lasting impression on me and kept me in for so long was A, watching a family member go through that and how
Right.
they were treated. And then B, watching my own brother after
Mm,
he left and the
mm,
examples that were used because of him.
yeah.
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 So you can go
Let's
ahead and
go,
start.
John.
Yeah,
Woohoo!
you can tell a little bit more about why,
Yeah, I want to hear
what
about
led
that
up to
because,
that.
yes. What made
Yeah.
you
Well,
leave? I mean, you lived in this perfect life. What made you leave?
what's wild to me is, I think I might have said this to you, Shelly. I don't remember. Um, but I used to have fantasies about being sent away
Mm,
to these camps and these boarding school kind of situations, because I hated it at home so much.
mm,
Grateful that we couldn't afford that
yeah.
because I think that was probably a much worse existence, even though I didn't know it at the time.
Right.
Um, why did I leave?
Or at least how.
Or why did you stay?
Man, well, I
No.
mean, I stayed as long as I did because I didn't have any other alternative,
Yeah.
honestly, and I didn't know what to do. But look, I mean, y- it's so ingrained in you from the very beginning. I mean, one of the Bible verses they use to soul win is, I forget the name, I forget the actual verse number, but for all have sinned and come short of the
Mm,
glory of God.
mm-hmm.
And they drilled that into you, and so you're never deserving from the very beginning. Just by virtue of being alive, you were not deserving. And thankfully Jesus came down and said, I got you, bro, and did that whole cross thing, and now you're cool. But you didn't deserve it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can humble yourself enough, then you'll be all right. And so it's a very tough place to grow up in that environment because, it's something I couldn't know then, but certainly as an adult can look back on now. Thankfully, therapy helps, and realize that that's where a lot of that came from. But, for me, it was elevated to another level for me because I was also being physically beaten by my mother.
Mm,
Not only did we have all of the mental and spiritual abuse of the church, I had the mental and emotional abuse from my mom. I had the physical abuse from my mom.
mm.
Shelly and I both experienced sexual abuse, at a very young age from a babysitter. It turned out that later we found out that he was just a teenager himself. So I'm sure this guy had been having the same things perpetrated on him
Right.
that we had on us. And then later, also much later, found out that it was rumored, at least, and quite possible and plausible, that he was part of a ring of boys, teenage boys, who had a bet to see, or some sort of betting thing to see how many children they could notch on their sexual abuse belt, as it were. And so those experiences pushed me in a different direction. And because I was the one that was being physically beaten up by my mom, I developed a hatred for her. And I legitimate, truly hated my mother at one point for a very long time. But that hatred is what really, I'm grateful for it, because that hatred pushed me to find something different. And so between my junior and senior year of high school, I decided to call the police, the local police, and I said, hey, I don't want to be here anymore. I can't stand this anymore. I want to get away. I'm afraid that if I leave, though, my parents are going to come and get me. And just to give you an idea of how scared we always were, at 17 years old, part of the reason, too, was I hit my mom back one time. And it was the worst beating she had ever given me. I mean, I was covered up like a boxer on the floor. She was just pow, 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 pow. And I finally hit her back just to get her off of me. But I was always so scared that I was home alone. And this is back in the day with, real phones that plugged into the wall. And, you'd have a 75-foot cord on that phone so you could kind of walk around the house with it.
Yeah.
And I took that phone at home by myself, knowing no one was around, and I still hunched down in the corner of the kitchen because I was scared. And I talked to the police officer, and I didn't understand at the time why he asked me this, but I definitely understand now. But as I told him the story, there was a long pause, and he said, "Are you in danger right now?" And I was like, "What? No, what the fuck are you talking about?"
Yeah.
I understand why he asked me now, but I didn't at the time. And I just was like, "No, what do you mean? I'm fine." And so after we talked, he just said to me, well, in Missouri at 17, which I had just turned 17. He said, you're considered a legal adult. And if your parents were to try to come after you, then you would be able to file a restraining order against them. And I said, fucking done, dude. That's all I needed. And, my escape was, I was lucky. My friend Ray's mom knew what was going on at the house. She knew what I wanted to do. And once she knew that I was, legally allowed to leave, she said that I could stay in their basement. And so, I had my grandfather's he was in the Korean War. I had my grandfather's army duffel bag, one of these gigantic duffel bags. I packed it full of everything that I had. I threw it in the basement, and I went out one day to mow the grass, and this was before, they had all the safety measures, and you could leave a lawnmower running with, as long as you wanted to, I suppose. And, but I say that because it was important to me at the time, again, going back to how scared I always was about everything. I knew that if I was in the middle of mowing the grass and the lawnmower cut out, my mother would get curious about why the lawnmower had cut out and would probably peek out the window or peek out the front door or come outside just to make sure I wasn't doing something wrong. And so that was a benefit to me. And so I scheduled it with my buddy Ray, and he had a car at the time, and he drove by the house, and I was out there mowing the grass, and he came to the house. I left the lawnmower running in the front yard. He parked outside on the street. I ran down, I grabbed the duffel bag, I threw it in the back of his car. He took off, and I finished mowing the grass and then put the lawnmower away. And then I walked a mile to Ray's house from there, and I just never went back inside.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And then, oh my gosh, that's so sad. So, and then how, Shelly, then you kind of said how the church handled that. So how did that go once you left?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So, and obviously everyone was searching for Jon at first, and he was smart enough not to tell me because he knew they'd break me.
Yeah.
And
True. True. And I left them a note too. I left my parents a
Okay.
note and I said to them, I'm leaving, don't try to follow me. If you do, I am able to file a restraining order against you and I will do it. And I would have. There
Oh,
was no
yeah.
question that I would have done that at that
Yeah.
point if I had to. So
And I
Yeah.
don't
anyway,
think that
please.
they
Yeah.
had a question that you would do it either, because things had gotten so tense in the
Mm.
house. And part of this, and this just goes to show you like how insane it seems, to the general population. But one of the reasons that things were so incredibly tense is that John was nominated for prom court, I believe.
Oh,
And,
yes. Yes. I was
and
nominated for prom king. Yeah.
At a normal high school? Like
At
public
a
high
normal
school?
high
yeah,
school. Yeah.
Oh,
so during the
boy.
course of time, I was able to go back to the Christian school, and John lobbied to stay at the public school because of his
Okay.
love for basketball. And
Yeah.
they finally were like, okay, fine, we're not going to fight you over this. You can stay there.
Well, I had convinced them that I was a good basketball player, and I had convinced them that if I was going to get any scholarship money or any kind of help to go to college, that this was my best chance. And
And I think they had
Good
given
job.
up on the fact that John wouldn't go to a state college, because that was also of the devil.
Oh,
But yeah,
of
it
course.
just, it was always a fight, always a fight,
Mm.
always a fight with him. And so things really escalated. And yeah, like John said, one of the worst beatings that, happened in our home. And so it was just like everything was at heightened alert. And it was largely due to the things that John wanted to do as a normal teenager.
Right.
That were viewed as worldly and horrible.
Mm.
And so afterwards, a lot of this, confirmation bias came into my life because, John was seeking worldly and evil and wicked things. And so look at what befell him.
Mhm.
Right. And so it wasn't until I was probably a senior in high school. So he had already graduated. And yeah, I guess a year or so had passed. And I was just like, why are people saying that God is judging him and all this stuff when it's basically just us not helping him? Like it started
Oh
to
my
click a little
gosh.
bit.
Mm.
And, I started asking some questions, and there was a group of women in our church who, basically would explain, well, this is our duty and this is why. And, scared me more and more like into believing, because I could see, like literally there were prayer meetings that were held that people would ask, and I don't remember it being our parents, but within the course of the prayer meeting, for our children who are wayward to come back,
Sure.
like things were prayed that, God would break his legs, break his, whatever it took. Like
Oh my
literally, yeah,
gosh.
that's fucked up, dude.
right.
That's why you broke your leg
This is
that
a-
one time, John.
This is the first I'm hearing of this.
You don't know, you didn't, I've never told you this.
No.
Yeah, like I literally,
It's messed up, y'all.
examples were given of like how God could
Help.
humble him because he
Oh.
hasn't humbled himself.
My
Well,
gosh.
joke's on them because I've never broken a bone in my body. So
Oh, their prayers did not make it through the clouds.
where's your God now?
Oh my gosh, that is disgusting. Oh,
Yeah. Well, so you can
That's really
imagine
fucked up,
the emotional and
oh,
crazy
totally.
manipulation.
Yeah.
And I felt this as like John and I were best buddies growing up. We were able to kind of create this fun imaginary life, play make believe, tell each other our secrets, have, the things that were normal to our little imaginative self. And
Tickle feet fights.
yes, like
Aw.
just we were the best of friends. And
Oh, God.
even, presented a united front when we had discussions with our parents about like, well, I don't think this is, quite the way that we're being taught it is. And we could have those conversations. Afterwards, it just felt like we don't talk about this. unless we are on our knees praying or condemning, the choices, because, and that's the thing is, you can see it now. Jon did struggle, but Jon didn't have support.
Right. Oh, yes. Yeah.
So it's like they were using the fact that
he was a normal teen. Yeah.
Was on his own, struggling to make sense of life and provide for himself as confirmation that God's judgment was upon him.
I hope that you all are enjoying this amazing conversation with Jon and Shelly. They have such an interesting story that's similar to mine in many ways, so we had way too much fun talking. I will be airing the second half of their podcast at the same time as this one, so do not be sad. You do not have to wait until next week. You can listen to the next one right now. Thank you all for joining me for another episode of the Shanny Pants Show. I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me every week. You can find all of my links to all my social medias, anything your heart desires, at shannypantsshow.com. You can even find my amazing merch is back up and running there. And you can email me from there, all the things. Also, you always ask, how can you help me out with this whole podcast situation? You can subscribe to my podcast. You can leave reviews. You can share it with friends. I appreciate it all. So I am super excited to bring you guys the rest of the season. It's going to be amazing. And I'll see you next week.